Summer 1973. Through the corridors of CIA headquarters walks a tall, gray-haired man, Director Richard Helms. In his hands is an order meant to erase the traces of operations that, according to the official version, never existed. The enormous furnaces in the basement run without stopping. Papers, tapes, photographs, everything disappears into the fire. The air is filled with the heavy smell of smoke, burnt paint, and hot metal. But not everything could be destroyed. A few surviving documents surfaced, and they showed this was not just a CIA program. It was an experiment on the human mind. You are listening to Black Vault Stories. Today, the story of one of the darkest projects of American intelligence, a project in which LSD, hypnosis, electroshocks, and methods of psychological breaking were tested on people. Its name was MKUltra. Today you will learn how prisoners and psychiatric patients were turned into test subjects, how a man who worked for the CIA fell from the 13th floor of a hotel, and why even today no one can say how many victims this project claimed. And most importantly, we will ask the question to which no one gives an answer. Was MKUltra really shut down in the 1970s, or does its shadow still wander among us under new code names? And if so, perhaps some of us have already become part of it without even realizing it. The early 1950s, the world is split in two. On the map, two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Between them, a cold silence that at any moment could be pierced by the whistle of a nuclear missile. But beneath the surface, another war is raging, one even more dangerous, a war for control over the human mind. American intelligence receives alarming reports. Soviet scientists are working on a project under the codename Whisper. According to rumors, it was a technology capable of breaking a person's will with a sound they could not even hear. People exposed to it began to forget their own names, renounce their beliefs, and obey orders without question. At the same time, reports arrive from Korea. American prisoners of war return home with completely changed views, sometimes even showing sympathy toward the enemy, as if someone had erased their minds and written a new one. In Washington, this was taken as a signal of alarm. If the enemy could reprogram a person, make them betray or kill, what would stop them from doing the same to a president, a general, or a CIA agent? In 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles signed an order to create a top-secret program, officially to understand and neutralize Soviet methods of control, unofficially to create the ultimate weapon, a puppet human being, stripped of free will, memory, and moral boundaries. The job was given to a man willing to cross any ethical line, a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb, a genius who could invent a drug that saves lives or a poison that erases identities. He became the architect of what the world would remember under the codename MKUltra. And if the Soviet Whisper was a weapon of silence, then MKUltra was meant to become a symphony of chaos, one from which no one could escape. As soon as the order was signed, the project began to spread like a tumor. MKUltra did not stay within the walls of the CIA. Its tentacles reached into universities, hospitals, psychiatric clinics, and even prisons. Sidney Gottlieb understood. Experiments had to be conducted everywhere. He recruited scientists, doctors, psychiatrists, even professors from leading universities. And he did it through dozens of front organizations, so that most of them never even suspected the real client was the CIA. Behind these scientific projects hid more than 150 sub-programs, in which they tested everything that could affect the human mind. Patients in psychiatric hospitals without explanation were given massive doses of LSD, mescaline, or psilocybin, often every day for weeks. They could be kept in complete darkness or under bright lights that were never turned off. Some were subjected to sensory deprivation, isolation in soundproof rooms at the bottom of a pool, where the water was heated to body temperature so that the person couldn't even feel their own skin. Others were exposed to a combination of drugs and hypnosis, the same phrases repeated hundreds of times in an attempt to erase memory and write in a new personality. There were harsher methods too, electroshocks in doses dozens of times higher than therapeutic levels, after which people forgot even how to hold a spoon or how to speak. And there were experiments outside the walls, right on city streets. Through Operation Midnight Climax, the CIA rented apartments disguised as brothels. Female agents brought men there, slipping LSD into their drinks without their knowledge. Behind a two-way mirror, CIA operatives observed how the drug affected people when mixed with alcohol and sexual tension. All of this was funded by taxpayer money, and even when the experiments ended in madness, disability, or death, the documents laconically marked the result as failure. But the scariest part wasn't even that. Some test subjects began to change so much that their families no longer recognized them, and not all of them ever came back. Among the hundreds of participants in MKUltra experiments, there were those whose stories became known, sometimes by accident, sometimes thanks to years of investigations. One of them was Frank Olson, a military chemist who worked in a secret U.S. biological laboratory. In 1953, he went on a work trip with colleagues. At dinner, without any warning, LSD was slipped into his drink. A few days later, he began to suffer from severe anxiety and paranoia, saying that he no longer wanted to work for the government. 1 week later, his body was found on the sidewalk beneath the windows of a New York hotel. The official version, suicide. But when his body was exhumed in the 1990s, it was discovered that there was a head injury, one unlikely to have been caused by a fall alone. His son believes his father was killed so that he would not expose the secrets of MKUltra. Another case, Canadian patient Linda MacDonald. She entered a clinic in Montreal with mild depression. There, Dr. Donald Cameron, who was working with MKUltra, prescribed her therapy. 86 days in a drug-induced coma, regular electroshocks 40 times stronger than normal, and thousands of repetitions of the same phrases through headphones. When Linda woke up, she did not recognize her children, did not remember her own name, and had to relearn how to walk and eat. Her personality had been erased, and there were others who didn't even know they were part of the experiments. For example, homeless people from the streets of San Francisco, lured by agents with offers of free dinner or a place to sleep. In return, they received a dose of LSD and hours of interrogation under hypnosis, while in the next room their reactions were recorded on tape. These stories are only a tiny fragment of what really happened. In most cases, the names of the participants remained unknown, and the results of the experiments classified. The secret might have stayed buried if not for a few accidental leaks of information. In the 1970s, investigative journalists and human rights activists began receiving disturbing testimonies from former patients and medical staff. The first articles appeared in newspapers about strange LSD experiments in hospitals and prisons. Families of the victims began to demand explanations and compensation. Public pressure grew. Hearings began in the U.S. Congress on possible abuses by intelligence agencies. And just as the government was still trying to deny everything, one detail emerged that made even seasoned senators shudder. It turned out that the CIA had not only conducted these experiments, but had also done everything possible to destroy any evidence of their existence. When the first testimonies began to appear in the press, the CIA faced the threat of public exposure, but instead of shutting down the program and admitting guilt, they took another step. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms signed an order that would forever go down in the history of intelligence agencies. He demanded the destruction of all documents related to MKUltra, reports, photographs, medical records, tapes, even banking transactions of front organizations. For several weeks, the furnaces of CIA headquarters burned with archives accumulated over 2 decades. Thousands of pages disappeared without a trace. Had this plan worked completely, today we would know about MKUltra only from rumors. But even the most thorough plan has a weak spot. 4 years later, in 1977, an employee stumbled upon boxes of documents that had miraculously escaped destruction. They had been mistakenly stored in another CIA department, among financial expense reports. It was about 20,000 pages. Contracts with front foundations, detailed instructions for experiments, internal correspondence. These documents officially confirmed for the first time what many had feared. MKUltra was real, and it was far more massive than anyone could have imagined. Soon after, the U.S. Congress created a special committee to investigate the activities of intelligence agencies. It was led by Senator Frank Church, and his hearings became the first public shock for the entire country. When the 20,000 pages of documents reached Senator Frank Church's committee, it became clear hiding the truth was no longer possible. In the summer of 1977, public hearings began in the halls of Congress. In the chambers sat senators, journalists, former CIA agents, victims, and their families. For the first time, America heard it from official lips. The government had conducted experiments with psychotropic substances, hypnosis, and electroshocks on citizens without their consent. One of the most striking testimonies was the case of Frank Olson. His story had already appeared in the press, but now it was told under oath. It was confirmed, before his death, Olson had secretly been given LSD, and after his suicide, the CIA had concealed the circumstances of his death for years. Under the weight of facts and public pressure, the government took an unprecedented step. Frank Olson's family received an apology from the President of the United States and compensation of $750,000. This was the first, and in fact the only, case where the state officially admitted its guilt within MKUltra. But for many other victims, there were no apologies. Their stories remained in the shadows, and their names in the destroyed archives. The Church hearings ended with bold statements, but they revealed only a small part of the iceberg, because even the surviving documents described only a portion of the program. What was hidden in the burned archives, no one knows to this day. The hearings in Congress gave the public the feeling that the truth had finally been revealed and that Project MKUltra had been shut down forever. But behind the closed doors of the intelligence agencies, no one ever said what really happened to the program. Because the destruction of documents and the accidental discovery of only a fragment left more questions than answers. If the official files described experiments with LSD, hypnosis, and electroshocks, then what was hidden in those folders that burned in the CIA's furnaces? Some former agents, already retired, hinted to journalists MKUltra had simply changed its name and moved to another department. Soon, rumors began to appear in the press about new projects with similar methods, Bluebird, Artichoke, and others, with names that sounded harmless but concealed the same technologies of breaking the human mind. And when in the 1980s and 1990s stories once again surfaced about strange experiments on prisoners, veterans, and even civilians, the question returned, was MKUltra ever truly shut down? And if not, can we be sure that today none of us has already become part of its new, more sophisticated version? We may comfort ourselves with the thought that MKUltra is left in the past, that it is just a dark chapter of history, one that will never repeat itself. But the truth is, we don't know what other projects may be hiding behind the closed doors of government laboratories, and if the government once managed to do this to its own citizens, what would stop it from doing it again? Perhaps a new version of MKUltra already exists. Perhaps it no longer uses LSD and electroshocks, but other, far more refined methods. Perhaps it is already being tested, right now. Are you sure your thoughts belong only to you? This was Black Vault Stories. Here, we gather the tales that were meant to remain classified. To make sure you don't miss the next episode, subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a comment. Do you believe MKUltra still exists? The next story may be even darker, and perhaps it already concerns you.